Thanks, Doug. I appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. How is it? We good? Everybody ready to get up and get moving this morning? Yeah? Hey, John. How are you, man? So good to see some familiar faces. Hopefully we'll get to know a few of you this morning. I want to thank the NSCA first for having me. I think it's always an honor and a privilege when you have the opportunity to get in front of your peers and present information, share things that you do. I'll tell you up front that for myself personally, I'll never admit or claim that I've invented anything in this field. I've learned from a lot of great people, and I've utilized those things for adding to my own arsenal of how I coach and the things I do on a day-to-day basis. And so my goal today is to kind of share some of those things with you. I'll tell you up front right now that I'm not going to stand up here and create any real earth-shattering information or anything like that, or argue about methods and things like that I think that are better than the others. My goal is to share what I do in terms of this subject matter, and I'll even admittedly tell you that Tyler, who was the previous TSAC director, I said, hey, what do you want to call this presentation? And him and I narrowed it down to that. He says, I think that sounds good. And so ideally what we're going to talk about today is a lot of integrations that we utilize in terms of how we train the trunk, and all the components that are housed inside of that. And we want to get up and we're going to show you some of those things, and I encourage you guys to jump up and be part of that as well. I have Coach Pat Nolan and Danny King who's here. They're part of my staff and do a great job on a day-to-day basis in some of the things that we execute. So they'll be showing and helping me hopefully look better than I typically do on a daily basis. So to start with, the first thing we're going to do, Doug, do I have to read that? That was my question. I was going to ask you, am I supposed to read that? All this stuff? I have no potential conflict of interest. That's what they sent to me. Okay. So anyhow, that was my question. I forgot. All right. To get started, I like to use this quote from Stu McGill. Obviously, if you've read or followed anything that he does, I think that there's a lot of validity when we talk about things that happen at the trunk, the lumbopelvic complex, and how we stabilize and the way with which we approach how we train throughout any of our kind of what I consider to be foundational movements. I think this is a great statement that really endorses what we should be thinking from a fundamental standpoint and how we're going to approach our integrations and progressions or regressions of our training. So the first thing we're going to do this morning is we're going to actually create a little bit of a test here. All right. So I'm going to have Danny come out. Danny has, what do you have there? About 20, probably 20 pounds apiece, okay? Pat's going to grab the same amount, but I'm having him grab a 40-pound or around that neighborhood, okay? From a observational perspective, who believes Pat has a much better opportunity to carry that load comparatively to Danny if we were to ask them to do anything for any long period of time? Yeah, would you agree with that? Pat's a relatively young and fit guy here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to give you an example of that. So I'm going to allow Danny to have a little bit of the upper hand here, and I'm going to put Pat in a compromised position and ask him to take the same amount of weight, but we're going to extend the lever and have him carry it from a different position. So Pat's going to go ahead and take that weight, put it out in front of him, and we're going to have them start walking. Ready, set, go. Okay? So I want you to just pay attention and observe like what happens the further that they go, okay? Look at their position, look at their posture, okay? Look what happens to their gait, okay? And relax. Okay, let's go back one more time, nice and easy, all right? Same amount of weight, right? Look what happens to Pat's posture, okay? Good job, Pat. I always like to pick on Pat, so all right, nice job. All right, so the bottom line here is it's not about the load that breaks you down. It's how you carry it, right? So just by taking the same amount of weight, by changing up how we're going to carry that weight, really starts to dictate how well we're going to be able to manage that load for a specific period of time. Okay, would everybody agree with that? Right? So, well done. Okay, Danny, were you okay? Okay, Danny looked like she was handling that pretty well. So, but at the end of the day, this is kind of the basis of what we want to talk about, okay? I'll give you a little backstory about myself, okay, on my back, for example, okay? A lot of what we see within the tactical population, we know that in general population as a whole, we see almost 80% or better of people that in our population have some type of low back or back injury or back pain at some point in their life, right? That's a pretty big number, okay? When we think about within our tactical population, those numbers also are very similar and sometimes even higher, right? In terms of how many occurrences we see within the population of the tactical field, the amount of back injuries or skeletal injuries that are related to load, okay? Ability to handle or manage force. And so what we want to do is try and figure out how can we best manage, mitigate, develop, and create better amounts of force application, force control, force mitigation, force resiliency, and all the things that are going to be associated with how we manage everything in and around our body depending upon where that force is being brought to us or how it's imposed upon us, right? So a lot of times I talk, especially when we talk about force, about that we get into a mindset a lot in strength conditioning that our goal is to be a gas pedal. And that to be a gas pedal, we're always thinking about how much force can I generate, right? How fast can I run? How much load can I move? How quickly can I move it? When the reality of it is when we talk about injuries, a lot of times those injuries come from where? Forces imposed upon us, right? Forces that we can't handle or mitigate well enough and something within our system breaks down or can't handle that load well, okay? And then we get injured, all right? So our goal is to kind of sort through some of those things, and I'll tell you that when I was in my 20s and I was invincible, obviously like most of us, I was squat, deadlift, Olympic lifting, you know, all those types of things, and I dealt with a lot of back pain myself. And when I got to grad school and had a bad day, couldn't hardly get out of bed the next day, I said something's not right. And so for me, I finally said, all right, I got to figure out what's going on here because I'm apparently healthy. I can move as much weight as I would like most of the time, and I find out that I have L4, L5 disc herniation, I have spondylolisthesis, I have pars fractures, and all of a sudden I go, oh, so that's why if I try and squat 400 pounds, it doesn't feel very good the next day. I have compromised the integrity of my structural system that doesn't really afford me the capability to move that load very well. So my first step in that process was I went and I saw a specialist. I said, hey, what do I do? And the specialist says, well, let's just go ahead and have surgery. And I'm like, whoa, hold on. I'm like strong and young guy, like let's pump the brakes here, right? I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. And so I didn't really like that advice, and I went and saw someone else. And the next guy says, well, here's what I want you to do. I want you to get as much mobility as you possibly can throughout your hips, throughout your trunk, throughout your body, okay? Be mobile, be flexible, have good range of motion. I want you to strengthen your trunk, strengthen your core, which I usually get penalized for saying, and Pat's probably keeping notes on that. I don't like to say that word too often because I think it's a very generalized term that we've commercialized in the field. And he says, and come back to me when you get to where you can't function like you want to on a daily basis. And I said, I'm going to take that advice, right? And so that was, well, I don't want to tell you how long ago. That was a long time ago, okay? It was quite a while ago. That's been almost close to 20 years ago now, right? Still have never had surgery. Granted, I have good days and bad days, but for the most part, I function relatively optimally with the exception of knowing that I have some limitations of how I load my spine and how I'm going to create my ability to move load and stay healthy and do things as much as I want to at the best capacity possible, right? And so I think for some of us, when we think about that in contextual terms, what do we do a lot with our folks when they come to us with injuries? Some of them we're not going to be able to influence without some type of orthopedic intervention, correct? Right? And at the same time, we have to find a way to keep them as healthy as possible within their given range of ability, right? So our goal is, can we find ways to understand what's going on with mechanisms within injury that they may have, and then improve or maximize their capability to still do the job, right, and stay as healthy as possible, okay? Because a lot of folks don't want to go straight to surgery either, right? Okay, so our objective here, okay, is force allocation, right? If I look at these very specifically, I kind of mentioned this already. We want to look at development, okay? We want to look at management. We want to look at how we're going to mitigate forces. We want to learn how to control them as well as possible, okay? And then we need to build resiliency, all right? Now, admittedly, I'll tell you that I haven't been into a forward area. I didn't serve, but I think of things that I can relate to within tactical operators and things that I can assimilate with. And on a yearly basis, I usually go on a big hunting trip with a bunch of my buddies where I usually trek about 60 miles in a week with different varying loads on me at about 10,000 feet. And so if I decide that I'm just going to hop out of the car and go do that on any given day, it's usually not going to work out very well for me. I'm going to be in misery, right? Because it's a pretty high demand activity. So some of the things I have to think about are, number one, and this is one of the things I always talk about when we talk about load carriages. The first thing that I have to build some resiliency to are my feet, right? There's very little that allows me to just jump into an activity like that without building up some tolerance, okay? Who can tell me the difference between a blister and a callus? What's a blister? Thank you. Okay, everybody get that, right? If we build a blister builds because we are creating too much, too soon, and the tissue's not prepared for it, and we get a blister, right? A callus is dosages of that same effort prolonged over time so that we build up a tolerance that allows us to handle that amount of load or force or duration, okay? So our goal with a lot of this stuff is we're trying to build calluses, okay? Does that make sense? Everybody follow me with that, all right? So within our movements, obviously we can talk about different types of movements that we want to do. The first thing that we're going to get into this morning is understanding that the complexity within the hip, the trunk, and everything, there's a lot of dynamics, okay? There's 29 pairs of muscles that attach to the hip, pelvis, okay, and the lumbo-pelvic complex, right? 16 of those act to either internally or externally rotate the hip, okay? That's a lot going on, all right? When we think about activities that we expect our folks to be able to handle, we want to create an environment where they're going to be able to do it repeatedly at high levels, accept and receive and deliver force, okay? And then be able to do it for extended periods of times when asked. Everybody agree with that? Yeah? Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to get up. We're going to go through some integration. If you want to jump up here, we're going to go through these. I want to encourage you to be a part of this here. We're going to take you through kind of our ground-up approach and show you positions that we start with and then show you integrations from them. Okay? So if you're willing and ready, hop on up. All right? Okay. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to go straight down to the ground. We're going to put you on your back. Okay? So our first mission here is to understand cognitive control within how our brain accepts or understands where we are at in terms of where we walk in the room, okay? My first evaluation whenever I work with anybody is their first test for me is the minute they walk in the door. I want to see what their standing posture is like, their gait is like, and the way that they present themselves when they walk in the door. Are there things I can pick up and understand from them immediately by what they present to me when they walk in the door, right? Now, there may be nonverbals in there, right? I may have to look at them and say, oh, wow, his posture, his demeanor, and all that tells me that we're going to have to get them a little bit more activated. We're going to have to get them woke up a little bit to get them going, okay? But are their feet ducked out? Is their upper body posture here, right? Are they lordotic? Okay, those are things I want to learn from them right away. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go feet flat on the floor, okay? We're going to put our feet flat on the floor. We want to relax and rest our head. So if I take Pat or Danny here, the first thing I'm going to tell them is I want them to take the space out from underneath my back, okay? Cues in this case are huge. So the first cue that I'm going to tell them is say, I want you to imagine like your lunch money's under your back, okay? Or your paycheck's under your back. Don't let me put my hand underneath of there, which means that he's going to have to brace, okay, or stabilize through the trunk, and then we want him to bring his knees up from that position, okay? So this is relatively simple here, okay? Everybody got that? We want your toes back, so we're going to keep our feet in a cocked position or dorsiflexed here. And our mission here is that we want to try and have him lower and tap the floor down to the ground and never lose contact with the floor, okay? The second cue here is I want to make sure that your head is relaxed and down on the ground. I don't want you using deep cervical flexors in order to maintain that position, okay? And we'll tell you why here in a sec. So to start out with, go ahead and just do a couple heel taps, what we call them. The longer that you reach, the further that you reach, the more demand there is for you to maintain that position, okay? If at any point you lose contact with the floor, shorten the lever and come back and make sure that we're maintaining, that we're keeping the integrity of that position. Try and relax your head to the ground. There you go, right? Okay? Now, one of the reasons that we want our head to be down to the ground is we're trying to maintain that our pelvo-ocular reflex is staying in check, okay? Head position is going to dictate torso position or my hip position, okay? So if my head is forward, the first thing that usually happens from the head to the pelvis is it's going to change or alter where the pelvis is going to be, okay? It's going to anteriorly rotate, all right? Everybody get that? So I don't want that head to be forward, which is going to force me to get into this position here, okay? We want that head to stay neutral so that low back stays down to the ground. Everybody good with that? Okay? Now, if we allow that position to be done, right, and this is earth-shattering, right? Does everybody agree with it? Like, this is like really cutting-edge stuff here, okay? So Pat stays in that position. If he loses that position as he comes forward and I can get my hand underneath of there, what have I influenced instead of the trunk or his stabilizers? What am I utilizing now instead? The pelvis and the hip flexor, right? The hip flexor becomes what's holding that position rather than the trunk by keeping his hip and lumbar spine in neutral. Okay, everybody good with that? Okay, so I can take this now and extrapolate it and make it a heck of a lot tougher. So if I ask Danny to go into feet up position, I'm going to go hands up position, okay? Now, we're going to have her do a dying bug. Everybody's seen these before, but now all I'm doing is making her have a little bit better control. We've seen this, we've done this before, okay? Nothing too drastic, okay? Everybody's done these. But again, if I'm missing the point of maintaining that position, then we miss the whole point of the exercise in itself, okay? So one of the keys that I like to always hammer home whenever we go through any of these integrations, as we're going to start kind of progressing through here this morning, is I call it position, posture, and perform, okay? As coaches, therapists, okay, whoever, whatever your role is, if we can't get our folks to understand that we have to get to the right position that we want them to be in first, they have to understand the posture that we want them to be in, and then we can ask them to perform, okay? They can't be in a different order than that, right? If they get out of position, if they have bad posture, and if they can't get into where we want them to be, just executing exercises for the sake of doing exercises really defeats our purpose, okay? Everybody agree with that, right? So what we're gonna do, position, I'm cueing here, keep that down. We want to keep that paycheck down. We're going to extend our hands. Now, if I want to make this more difficult, I can say, okay, I'm going to influence her trunk a little bit, and I'm going to push back here, okay? So now I actually gave her a little bit of stabilization, some tactile feedback for her to account for that and create the same environment from a little bit different perspective, okay? Everybody see that? So go ahead and try that. Let's go into that position. We'll come around. We'll kind of see if you haven't done these before. If I give you a little bit of tension, come down, you see the difference in influence that we get from the trunk from there. Yeah, go ahead, okay? Pull you back a little bit. Okay, push down on there, here. There you go, okay? Push down, good. Everybody see that, right? So a little bit different, good. And then we can go into alternating patterns, right? So go ahead, good. Push down, good, and hold. There we go, okay? Everybody see that? Good. Now, the end range of all of this for us is actually getting to where we create a little bit more challenging, what I call like our rudimentary movement patterns. So if I take Danny down here, okay, we're gonna challenge you a little bit now, is I'm gonna put her in the same position. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have her go elbow to knee, okay, and we're gonna do a rolling activity, opposite. No, left, good, and extended there, okay. I'm gonna put her in this position now where what I wanna see is a lot of control from her. So low back is pushed down flat. I'm gonna have her roll all the way to her right side. She's gonna roll down. Her mission here is to stay connected the whole time, okay? I want that leg to stay extended. Now, what does she do in order to get back up there? I'm gonna pick on her, okay? Right? Use momentum, right? Use a lot of momentum to get back from that position. What I wanna do is see her stay connected and do that, okay? So I want you to try this. Low back stays down, elbow to knee contact, roll to that side. Really be strict in the delivery of this. Down to the side, and then roll ourselves back. Don't let yourself come disconnected there, and then come back, okay? Right? And come back up, okay? So we get a lot of lateral trunk from there, And our goal is, can we maintain that connectivity throughout, okay? Good. Now, the second part of this is to actually do a rolling activity where we're going to put them into what I call a banana position. Who wants to be the lucky contestant? Defers right away. Nice. Okay. So we're going to put Pat in what I call banana position. Now, from here, levers are lengthened entirely, right? I've got to get him into this position. I still say, hey, keep the paycheck trapped there. What I want him to do is roll all the way over, controlled, make it all the way over to his stomach, okay? Manage that. And now come back. Right. Okay. So, good. And relax. You see how easy that was, right? Okay. Let's give that a whirl. Okay. So now, the goal here is I don't want to use momentum. Okay. What we're doing is we're creating circuitry. We're trying to get our body to understand the messaging system of how we're coordinating and asking the trunk, the hips, the torso, our shoulders to influence how we coordinate and stabilize from top to bottom, okay? And again, pretty tough to cheat. Now, as we roll over, one of the things that we will do is if you struggle with this early is I'll say I want you to lift through the heel to allow that glute to start helping and creating that contralateral side to assist in that rolling pattern, okay? So these are basic, simple things. But again, if we can't do these well at the start, some of this high-level stuff that we're working our way towards over here really kind of misses the mark if we can't do this well, okay? So we start with a lot of these things ground-based and simple, and we want them to be able to handle them well, understand how we're trying to ask them to operate positionally, okay? And then really own them and learn how to do them exceptionally well, okay? Okay, anybody have questions with those before we move on? Yes? Yeah, good question. So typically for myself, I always think of dorsiflexion in terms of what that does in terms of glute activation. So I'm huge on cueing that I always want you in dorsiflexion just because of that. So good question. Yes, anybody else? Okay. So now, who here works with within the fire community? Okay, good. All right. What's your name? Katie. Good. Where are you from? Okay, awesome. So Katie, what's your role? Okay, great. So tell me what you're doing within your setting to improve on the weight or technology within your turnout gear. That was a trick question. Okay, but so at the end of the day, okay, who works within the military? Okay. What's your name? Carson. Carson, where are you from? Okay, awesome. How are you guys, your role is strength conditioning, okay? How are you guys creating programming within what you do to combat gunshot wounds? Okay, I'm creating levity. Obviously, there's no levity in being shot, but at the end of the day, I used to have people that would ask me all the time. I used to work with some high-level skiers, right? And they would always come to me and say, hey, what do you do for ACL prevention? And I go like this, I go. They're going 60 miles an hour with freaking sticks on their feet. How in the world am I going to be able to do anything about an uncontrollable circumstance, right? And that's the bottom line, okay? We cannot control some of the things within our environment. Our mission is to make sure that we enhance their capability to do the best job and give them the best opportunity for success, okay? That's a great one from Bill Belichick says that a lot, whether you're a Patriots fan or not, which I'm not, it's fine. But at the end of the day, give yourself the best opportunity for success, right? There are things that are uncontrollable within a chaotic environment that a lot of our folks have to deal with on a daily basis. But if we can heighten their resiliency to those things, okay, we know that their ability to come out of them on the other end is probably going to be better, right? Would everybody agree with that? Okay, does that make sense? All right. So moving on here. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take some of our bands here. So if you want to grab bands, let's go with the half-inch bands or the 1-inch bands. If you want to partner up here, we'll go ahead and you guys can Find a friend, okay? How many do we have there? We have enough? We don't need a ton of tension here, okay? We got a couple. We can probably use these too. All right, okay, good enough. Okay, so, yeah, that'll work. So what we're gonna do is, we're gonna go through some different variations within our Pal-Off series, but everybody, who's never done a Pal-Off, right? Like, they're relatively common, right? Everybody's seen them, okay? Our mission here is not just go through and show them to you, okay? We want to talk about positions. We want to talk about stances. We want to talk about creating a higher level of control within our positions in those Pal-Offs, okay? So if we start from a kneeling position, let's just use one band. You guys can kind of go side to side here, okay? Half kneeling. We typically start in our half kneeling position, okay? Relatively simple, but there's a couple things. Again, we're gonna cue. I want you tall through the spine, right? I want her to engage through the glute on this right side, all right? And if we lengthen this lever, which is where she's at, we're gonna heighten the demand on the trunk, right? We're gonna heighten the demand on the shoulder and also where she has to be positionally, right? So she's doing a pretty good job there. Now, one of the things that we see a lot of is from this position is this guy here, right? Like not having the toe tucked. Okay, I'm kind of a stickler about that. I actually want her to tuck that toe because it's going to make her have to work just a little bit harder, all right? Now, go ahead and relax. For you, probably another half hour, right? Okay. Now, so that's a simple position. Now I'm going to say, all right, I want you to bring the knee up off the floor, okay? So I'm going to have her bring the knee up off the floor, still in that position, still extended, okay? Changes the balance, changes her dynamic, makes her have to work just a little bit harder, okay? Split stance now, knee elevated, okay? Then we're gonna come up, we're gonna go even stance, okay? So now she's standing, fully even stance, okay? Same thing, okay? We're just gonna show these just for the sake of argument, all right? Now, one of the things especially tactically we'll do is we'll say, I want you to go staggered stance, okay? And we talk a lot with folks about like shooting stances and things like that. We're gonna practice and have them focus on getting into some specifics of stances that maybe are relevant to us, okay? You guys can determine them, right? Pretty simple, okay? We good? Okay. Now, if we want to make this even harder, we would actually say, okay, I want you to go into single leg stance, okay? So I'm going to have her go single leg stance, go inside leg, it's probably easier, okay? Go knee up, okay? I'll put her in position there. Pat's going to have to lighten that just a little bit. And we'll go adductor and abductor, where we're going to have her get tall on that leg. We want her to keep her posture, right? So position and posture, and then ask her to perform from there, okay? And then she would switch and do that on the other side. So now if she goes outside leg up, this becomes a little bit tougher. Watch her kind of battle with that position a little bit. Now she's really got to use those adductors. You can see from a perspective of influence in that hip and through the trunk and finding center becomes a little bit more challenging, right? Everybody good with that? Now, that's relatively simple, okay? What we want to do is add that next level of progression to that, okay? Most of our folks can handle some of those things relatively easily, okay? So now we're going to say, I want you to go back to your kneeling stance position, okay? And we're going to go through what we call saws. So I'm going to have her, from that position, Pat's going to give her some tension. She's going to saw hat brim down to belt buckle, okay? So that's my two cues, right, where I want her to go. As she gets up into this position up overhead, it's going to ask a lot more of her from the trunk, especially lateral trunk, okay, lateral flexion to maintain that. And I would say, I want you to saw yourself in half from there, okay? Relatively difficult, and you'll see as you increase that tension, it becomes a heck of a lot tougher, all right? Now, good, nice job. Okay, so we're gonna show these and we're gonna have you guys work on these, okay? Next one's just gonna be rotation. So I'm gonna say, I want you to go shoulder to shoulder, so she's gonna hold from there. She's gonna go shoulder to shoulder, okay? Nice and easy, but we want the rotation to come through here, right? I want the rotation to come through the shoulders, through the thoracic spine, and not from anywhere else. So the bottom half, I say, is an anchor, okay? That stays stable, okay? I don't want her moving around from there. I want her to gain that position, gain that posture before she goes from there, okay? Everybody good with that? All right, now, we would go through the same progression, right? We would move her knee up off the ground. We could move her to an even stance. We probably wouldn't do these necessarily from a single leg stance, okay? We usually do those in iso hold. So that's kind of our progression. Iso hold, move through strength or range of motion, gradually work our way up to things that are going to be more dynamic, which is what we're going to do next. And then the end range of that is going to be something powerful, explosive, speed-based, and those types of things. Okay, so the last one here is we'll do it from lunge position, okay, because that's kind of my favorite. Okay, is we're going to do what we call a revolving Palloff. So knee up off the ground. Okay, and what Pat's going to do now is he's going to create a difference in tension throughout that position. Okay, so he's going to move around here and force her to have to account for this dynamically throughout that range. The whole time, she's constantly changing the stability throughout that pattern. She has to maintain her posture, maintain position, right, if she's going to be able to perform that well. Okay, very good with that? Now, if we make this even harder, Pat would then say, okay, I'm going to do this dynamically now. My goal here now is to make her really work, okay? So now all of a sudden, she's going to have to hold position, hold balance. Pat can be a little bit meaner, okay, depending on how she's doing, okay? But he's going to really force her to handle that in a lot more dynamic nature, okay? Everybody good with that? Woohoo! Nice job. Okay, so here's what I want to do. Go ahead and, if you haven't tried some of these, go ahead and grab bands. I want you guys to kind of go through these. We're going to come around, kind of help. Does anybody have questions with those before we get into them? Okay, here we go. So let's start with going through our basics. I want you, if you haven't done a saw, let's go to the saw first, okay? Most of us have done the regular hold, so let's try the saw. Really focus on our cue here, right? I want you to get up to hat brim, down to belt buckle, maintain posture, maintain position, go from where you are most comfortable, okay? If that position is easy for you, progress in a knee off the ground, okay? You can go to even stance from there, but at least give those a try from challenging your capability here. Good, nice job there. Okay. Good question. Okay, which leg, right? We can do them both, right? Yeah, we can definitely do them both. Depending upon if we have specifics within what we want to accomplish, we can maybe argue that a little bit. But I typically like to have them do both sides, outside knee, inside knee, and kind of work through those, right? It's going to change our stability pattern depending upon which leg is forward, okay? Good. Go ahead and switch that up. Go ahead and switch partner there and let the other one try. Good, and we can go into rotation also, okay? Let's go ahead and switch it up, go into rotation, and then after that, I want you to try the revolving, okay? So if you haven't tried the revolving, go ahead and try that one. Good, keep that hip forward. There you go. Move your way around, good. So you really see the demand changes quite a bit when we get into that revolving position, right? Now, we want to make sure that as we go through that, right, and we have that, is that we're cognizant, right? We have to have a little bit of ownership within our partners, okay, or our coaches, that my goal, especially with doing those, isn't to make them look silly or to put them out of position or to make them, you know, lose their posture entirely, right? So we want to try and make sure that we're within their range to handle that load and do it well, okay? As they get better at it, right, there's a learning curve here, okay? So our brain is trying to process, how am I going to maintain position? How am I going to maintain posture? How am I going to keep myself where I can hold that without losing control, okay? All right, everybody good with that? Awesome. Any questions with that? Yes?
So, like the rotation, these take quite a bit. So you're
yeah.
not pressurizing and holding your breath the entire time. You're
right.
breathing and bracing.
Right.
What do you find is the best strategy? Is it nose breathing, belly breathing?
I just try and cue them to breathe, number one. If possible, I say in through the nose, out through the mouth, right? Like breathe, exhale. Really a lot of that I think starts from where we started on the ground, is teaching them like basic breathing patterns from that heel tap position, so that as they progress to this, they're ingrained into doing that, hopefully, you know, but at times, like, yeah, you get into there and all of a sudden they go, oh, holy crap, all right, we're really doing this, right? And all of a sudden then they quit breathing, you cue them, right? Breathe, right? Exhale, whatever, you can kind of cue them to make sure that they maintain breathing, yeah, because you'll see that a lot, right? All of a sudden high demand comes up and what do? And they're turning purple, right? Okay, good, yeah, good question. Anything else? Okay, so now, if we move up, we're going to go into a little bit more dynamic. We're going to use our med ball here, okay? I'll throw some of these out. 8 pound, not too heavy, 10 pound, okay? And now, we've done some ISO holds. We've done from different stances, different positions. Now we're going to add some external load here that's going to force them to be a little bit more in command, okay? So the first one that we're going to do is we're going to have Pat go from kneeling stance position again. Again, we're starting from the ground. We're going to have him work on anti-rotation now, okay? Force that's being imposed upon us. I don't want him to allow this ball to overcome him. So Danny's going to throw the ball right out over his knee. Pat's mission is to not let that ball actually rotate him. We don't want him to collapse and lose posture to the force of the ball, okay? Danny's really nice. She's really nice, okay? I'm not so nice. So if I threw it to Pat, I'm going to make him work a little harder. Man, these balls are slick, okay? You can see he really has to do a good job stabilizing, okay, through the torso there in order to maintain that position, okay? If he moves up to the knee, off the knee now, this can become a little bit harder, okay? He's gonna have to have better control through the hip, okay? And you can see Pat does a pretty good job with that. But my goal is to force him to work from there, okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to try that, okay? We're gonna go, again, outside knee, inside knee. You can do it either way here, all right? And you'll see that the difference in positioning there definitely influences more, especially through the hip, okay? Our hip stability from that position is going to be compromised by being in the staggered stance, okay? But I want him to maintain the integrity of that position at all time, okay? If they fall apart, if they lose posture, I have to do one of two things. Either change the load or change the velocity of the throw, right? Okay? The other thing, big common mistake when we do this is for us to have our partners where Danny says, oh, well, I know, I got a great idea. I'll do the same thing. I'll throw it to you, you throw it back to me, and we'll both try and do it. And then what happens? We don't do a very good job feeding. I'm trying to work while he's trying to work, and I'm concentrated. We lose kind of sight of that. So I actually really dictate, one of you goes, one of you throws, right? I don't want you to both try and do the exercise at the same time because my goal is I want him to do it well and I want you to do it well. I don't want you to both kind of do it like so-so, all right? So let's go ahead and we're going to try that real quick. Don't have to be super aggressive here, but start from a kneeling position. You can go to a standing position, okay? And your goal is stop the ball, okay? Be resilient to the force of the ball when it gets to you. And we have to do it from a tall spine where my goal is don't let that ball overcome your position and overcome where your shoulders and torso are at, okay? Yeah, so this gets a little bit tougher, okay? Right. Now, some of the things I can do from that kneeling position that may also influence it is I can determine the width of my stance from that kneeling position or that lunge position, right? Okay? How many people do FMS and things like that, right? What do we put people in this position for? On the plank. To compromise and put ourselves in a pretty vulnerable hip stability position, right? So if I narrow that stance, it's going to definitely influence the hip at a greater demand, right? So I can widen that, I can adjust that, but our goal is to put them into relatively neutral and then function from there and work on enhancing how aggressively I can throw that ball, okay? Make sense? Okay, any questions with that? All right, so now, if we make this a little bit more difficult, what I want to do now is we've demonstrated that Pat is superior at this stuff, right? He's doing a heck of a job, okay? I'm going to actually have Pat stand up now. I want him to face me, and what we're going to do is we're going to do what I call like hip throws. Typically, we do these off of a wall, where I'm going to have him fire the ball off the wall, but I want to throw it off of his hip, okay? And we're going to change, right, the angle, okay? So I'm throwing it off his hip, and then when we would get better at this, okay, what I would do is I would actually have him fire this off the wall repeatedly. Bang, 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 okay? I'm changing the plane with which he's catching and receiving the ball, and now working on influencing the hip and the trunk rotationally and anti-rotationally to have him start developing force, okay? What does some of that stuff look like if we think about combatives, right? Bang, right? Utilizing the lower body, connecting it through the upper body to execute a punch, okay, or something of that nature, okay? So we want to try and put them in those positions to develop that force, throwing it outside, boom. If I wanted to, I could switch, okay, go left and right, fire that ball, okay? You can see he does a pretty good job there, okay? Could we do that from a staggered stance? Sure. Any of these things, we can change the stance to change the demand, right? As long as they show command, we can use it for variation or we can use it for progression and regression, right? The narrower the stance, okay, the more I put them into these positions, the higher the demand for them through the torso, through the hips and trunk to be able to execute those well, okay? All right, so let's try that one real quick off the hip. Doug, where are we at on time? 10? Okay, perfect. Good. All right, here we go. Oops. Look at that. I told you I didn't have slides. Good. That's it. Awesome. Okay. So now, as we start to develop some of these things, right? We're showing good command from our ground positions, right? We can lengthen levers and maintain good trunk control, all right? We can get to our pal-off positions. We can do our med ball work, and we're starting to see them command some of these things, right? Is we want to get to where they can now do them a little bit more dynamically, or we want to add a stimulus-based approach to some of these things, okay? So if I'm going to use Pat because it's a lot more fun. I can be a little more aggressive here, okay? We're going to go through some manual progressions here, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have Pat go from an even stance. Again, we can change stance on this, but I'm going to have him basically say, I want you to own an athletic position, okay? And his goal now is I'm going to provide him with tactile feedback to see how well he can maintain position and posture, okay? So I'm going to start with saying, okay, here we go. Ready? Push, 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 high, low, okay? So we see that, right? He has to learn how to stabilize through there, and I say, I want you to be a statue. That's my cue. Be a statue. Don't let me move you. Top and bottom, okay? And as he gets better at this, I start increasing the speed with which I start pushing him around, okay? And you can see, when we get further away from center of mass, what happens? It becomes a lot more challenging, right? But the goal here is I want him to learn how to reflexively stabilize, maintain upright posture, keep himself balanced, and stay in position, okay? Can I do that from a staggered stance? 100%. If I want to be even more stimulus-based, I'll say, okay, we've done 2 sets of this, 3 sets of this, a week of integrating these in, a couple times. And I'm going to say, I want you to go back same position, close your eyes. Now I'm taking away his visual reference, okay, of spatially where he's at and forcing him to have to be better, okay? Our visual system is constantly giving us input on where we are in space, right? Okay? So there's a concept that I consider what I call hardware and software, okay? We have to constantly understand that our software system, which is our brain, our nervous system, all the things that are messaging the body where we are, which started at the first thing I said, which was, what do our folks look like when they walk in the door, okay? If they walk in the door and we have rounded posture and all this type of stuff, okay? We've been rucking for all the basic and we look like this because we've been carrying a pack forever, okay? Our brain understands that's normal. Our brain understands that's the position that we think is neutral, right? So the software system is constantly downloading what we find to be normal. Our goal is to influence that software, constantly upload that software so that our hardware, which is the muscular system, our bones, our connective tissue, and all those things, are getting better information on where we want them to be, how we want them to stand, how we want them to execute, and how we want them to perform. Does that make sense? Okay? So our job is to constantly provide them with software updates to influence how they're going to expect the physical aspect of our hardware to perform. Okay? Does that make sense, everybody? Okay. Go ahead and try that one. Let's go through our standing tension, okay? Partner up, start from here, okay? And you'll find out real quick like how much we can actually influence or create that tension. Go ahead, okay? Push and pull, top, bottom, push opposites, rotate high, low, okay? Work on trying to get them to maintain position, okay? Notice where their head is at, right? Again, head is going to dictate everything else. We want their head to stay neutral, okay? Awesome. Now, again, we can do the same thing by lengthening lever. So if I have Danny come out, and I'll say, Danny, I want you to go arms extended, okay? Hands together, okay? I can lengthen that lever and now do the same thing, okay? Resist, anterior pressure, right? Come on, Danny, okay? Push and rotate, don't let me move you, okay? Push and rotate, don't let me move you. Angularly, pull her down and across, push her up and across, okay? You can see by lengthening that lever becomes a lot more difficult, okay? So our goal is to work our way through a lot of these progressions and have our folks given stimulus that's going to continually force them to have to account for things out and around their body and then do it repeatedly, right? We do these things literally almost on a daily basis, okay? When we have our folks come in on a daily basis, we're going to do some form of integration that includes these types of activities. From the easiest stuff all the way up to this more complex stuff, even to where we'll do some of our pal-offs and things like that with speed. We'll start moving. We'll start being a lot more explosive and dynamic with them, okay? You'll notice I didn't have a lot in my slides today. My email is at the end of there. I'm very transparent. Joel@authenticperformancecenter.com. I'm happy to send you. I've got pages upon pages of these progressions from start to finish. I will gladly send them all to you. I have no problem with that, okay? Because at the end of the day, they're just things that I've grown to incorporate over the course of my career. I'm not saying they're right or they're wrong, and we're constantly adding more to those. But what I typically tell people is utilize the thought process to analyze what works within your environment and with your folks to determine what's the best appropriate way to integrate these things, to influence the things you're trying to get out of their performance within your setting. Does that make sense? Okay, we good? Okay, so thank you guys. I have plenty of time to take questions and things like that here. I want to make sure we stay on time. What's that? Okay, the last thing that I'll leave you with is, I've always taken a stance that our goal really is to make sure that we can communicate well enough to our folks that they understand what we expect them to do, right? So I say that's our job to inform. What's that? Okay. We have to make sure that within our communication that they understand our passion for them to get better and for them to do their job well, which is to inspire them and constantly be very consistent on a daily basis, right? And we have to instruct them on how we expect them to do these things, right? So I always say inform, instruct, and inspire really is a lot of what our job is about, okay? And so I appreciate you guys that participated this morning. I know we kind of went through a whole host of things relatively quickly, and we could probably spend the whole day actually if we wanted to dig fully into these things. But if we have a minute, I'll answer your question if you had it. Who had a question?
Yeah, I saw you close your eyes and talk about taking away your vision. Have you ever used the shutter glasses? Do you mess with those at all?
I have occasionally, yeah. I don't utilize them. We do some work with some vision-based training within our facility where we'll do cognitive work, whether that be putting them under stress and fatigue and having them do word searches under fatigue and stuff like that, which drives guys bonkers, right? We'll do a lot of different things like that, memory recall and things, but we will influence near-far vision stuff, right? Like having them maybe stand in those positions on something I can read here and then something further out where we have to actually work on near-far vision acuity-based things. So there's some of those things, and I can talk about some of those things later if you want to outside or something like that. But we do create and put some of those things into play at times as part of a progression. So yeah, it's a good question. Anybody else? Okay, I want to make sure we stay on time because I know they've got live cast stuff coming up next. Thank you guys so much for coming. I appreciate you participating and letting me kind of bark at you for an hour. So hopefully you guys enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.